welcome to Real Estate Cookies. Glad you're with us this morning. We're going to get right into seller financing today. If you've liked the episode so far, hit that subscribe button and get notified when I add new videos. So today we're going to talk about seller financing. I was recently speaking with another person that was getting started in investing, and they asked me how I got started. And after buying our first duplex that we moved into, and I discussed that on a previous video, the next strategy we used to purchase a house was seller financing. And we learned this seller financing by doing some research. We went to a seminar and read some books on it. And so seller financing was a way for us to find a down payment that we didn't have. Now, this wasn't easy. And I'll explain what seller financing is, but it wasn't easy. We asked 20 people. I wrote 20 offers asking for seller financing and was told everything from it's illegal, banks don't allow it, you can't do that, no one does that anymore. Why would I ever do that? I mean, everything under the sun was told to us why this doesn't work. And after 20 people, I was a little discouraged, but we kept going. And lo and behold, the 21st person said, sure, I'll hold financing for you. And we got into our first investment deal. And since then, seller financing has really been a cornerstone to everything that we've done. We have commercial properties and different properties everywhere that all have a component of seller financing into it. Now, to be honest, it's easier in that it's more relevant. More common in the commercial real estate for sellers to hold a second mortgage or finance part of the property purchase than it is in residential real estate. However, in investment real estate, it is very popular. So let me explain. First off, let's go to seller financing. What exactly is it? Well, let's take an example. If I'm buying a house and I've agreed to purchase it for $300,000, and the bank that I've talked to says, well, you're not moving into the house, so it's not an owner-occupied, it's an investment property. Therefore, we'll lend you 80% of the purchase price. That means they'll give me $240,000. And that means I got to come up with a down payment of $60,000. And the main thing people tell me when they're getting involved in real estate is that I don't have that down payment. I don't have $60,000 to put down on a piece of property. Okay, so what if we could cut that in half? What if it's $30,000? Okay, which it would be 10% of this purchase. So if I had $30,000 to put down to purchase the home, and the bank gave me $240,000, that means I'm still be $30,000 short. What ways can I raise that extra $30,000? Well, the number one place to look is the seller. If the seller has a mortgage on the house of, let's say it's $200,000. So the seller is selling a house and he has a purchase price, he has a sale price of $300,000. He has a mortgage of $200,000. He has a gap there of $100,000. Okay? So if I go buy the house, get my first mortgage, bring in my down payment, he's going to get his first mortgage paid off and put $100,000 in his pocket. Pretty good payday. Okay? However, let's say that we contacted this seller and we said we'd like to buy your property. $300,000 is agreed purchase price, and I have a bank that'll give me $240,000. I'm bringing in $30,000, but I'm $30,000 short. And I'm wondering if you would finance the remaining $30,000. Basically, give me a mortgage. We'll create it on a piece of paper saying that I promise to pay you back $30,000. We can put an interest rate on it of 7%, and we'll amortize it or spread out those payments over 30 years so we know what the actual payment will be per month. They might say, why would a seller do that? Well, let's think about this for a second. First off, he has some security. Now, banks work in lien or loan positions. So if the bank gives you a mortgage, they're going to want to be in first position. Okay, meaning that if you default, they're the first one in line to get their money. Okay, I've never had a bank really go in second position. They're always in first position. And a seller could go in second position. So for example, if the bank got all their money and then he still had a note, he would be next in line if everything goes it's south if people stop paying. So if I stop paying my note, the bank's going to go get their money from me, or they're going to sell the house to get their money back, and anything left over would go to the seller. Okay, so what's the motivation for a seller to do this? Well, first off, let's look at taxes. Because if, as the seller, remember, we're selling for $300, the seller owes $200. He has a $100,000 gain on the sale. And this is not a property that he's living in. This is an investment property that he is selling. Well, he's going to have a taxable event on that sale of $100,000. He's going to pay capital gains on that, depending how, where his income is and everything. It all changes. It's not a tax class, but he's just going to have a taxable event, trust me, on that $100,000, all in 1 year, all at one time. However, if he lent you $30,000, he would not be getting back all of the money at one time. He would be getting, remember, he's selling for $300, he owes $200. If the bank gives you a loan for $240 and I kick in $30,000, now he has a $60,000 gain, tax gain. The other $30 would be deferred, and because it's paid over time, that tax gain is going to be spread out. So there's a really real and good tax advantage to a seller to hold financing, to not get all the money up front, but to give you a loan for that other $30,000. Okay? That's one thing. Second piece is interest. So let's do a little math. How do banks make their money? Well, it's quite interesting. So on a $240,000 loan, remember that's what we talked about? How much interest do you think the bank is going to make on that loan? So let me get from my old man glasses here for a second. So on a $240,000 loan, okay, the bank on a $240,000 loan at 6%. Okay, let's say it's 6% on a $240,000 loan at 6%. You're going to have a nice monthly payment, okay, of $1,438. So that's your principal and interest. You're going to pay that every month, $1,400. And that's why this works. So people are like, oh, I can do that. I can move in. I can make those payments. That's not a problem. That's a decent monthly payment to pay to have a piece of real estate. What we don't realize, though, is over the course of 30 years, paying that $1,438 payment, you're going to pay a total of $518,000 for that home. Wait a minute, I bought the house for $240,000. Right, but the total amount you're going to pay is $518,000 for the home. That's principal and interest. So if you take out the price of the home, the principal, over the life of the loan, you've paid $278,000 in just interest. Almost, it's more than the initial loan. It's a 100+ gain for the bank in interest over those 30 years. That's how the banks make their money, and your seller can make money the same way. So in that same scenario where we're buying a $300,000 house, the bank is giving us a $240,000 first mortgage, we're bringing in a down payment of $30,000, and we're asking the seller to hold a note for us for $30,000. And let's say we offer terms to him at a $30,000 note at 7% interest spread out over 30 years. Okay? Now, that payment on that type of note is only $199 per month. Not very bad. You can afford that. Okay? $199 a month. However, over the life of the loan, of that $30,000 loan, you're actually paying him back a total of $71,000. And of that $71,000, $41,000 is interest. So the seller is actually getting $40,000 more for the house than he originally is selling it for. So he's not selling it for $300, he's selling it for $340. He's getting $40,000 more if it goes over the life of the loan. Okay, so that's the interest play. That's an advantage to the seller. It's advantageous to the seller to do that. What are the risks? Well, the risks are the seller would be in second position. So if something went bad, the bank would get their money back first. He'd have to stand in line for that $30,000. But remember, he already got $60,000 when he closed the loan. The other advantage to the seller is that the tax advantage. It's spread out over time, the gain. Now, another advantage is that very rarely do you actually let a seller mortgage go the entire 30 years. Usually, it's what's called a balloon. So it's the payments are spread out over 30 years, but the whole mortgage comes due maybe in 5 years. So you're going to spread the payments over 30, but the whole thing comes due in 5. So it's called a balloon. So the balloon comes due in 5 years. So, well, how do I pay that? Well, you can, at that point in time, if you've purchased the property the right way, meaning you bought it under value, you've taken care of the property and either rented it and increased the value or fixed it up and held it, however, whatever you've done, now after 5 years, you should have more equity in the property to where you can refinance the property and pay back that $30,000 to the seller. You could also get a line of credit on the house because now you have that equity there. You get a line of credit so the house goes up in value. Remember, your initial note was only $240,000, and that means you have $60,000 there. And if the house goes up another $30,000 or $40,000, you should be able to get a line of credit for at least $30,000 to give to the seller to pay back that note within 5 years. It's usually not much of a problem unless a lot of circumstances change. So that's how you pay it back. Now, what happened was we were asking sellers to hold financing for us to help us get into a property, and they all told us no, until we figured out one little secret. We were asking your run-of-the-mill person selling their house on the MLS, multiple listing service. These were people that lived in their house, they were selling it, they were moving to another house, they needed every dollar they were going to get from that house to get to the next house. They didn't understand real estate or real estate investing, and so this sounded like some crazy strategy. However, the reason the 21st person said yes is because that person was a real estate investor. He's what they call in the industry a wholesaler. This individual that we bought it from would go to the auctions at the city, buy 4 or 5 houses that were in bad condition for cash, and then resell them to investors. And so that he would make a small markup on each house. His markup was $10,000. So if he went to the city auction and bought a house for $100,000 and he paid cash for it, he would sell it to me for $110,000 in the same condition. Now you say, well, he made $10,000 with doing nothing. He took the risk. That's a wholesaling. That's a whole different topic. But that particular person was a wholesaler. So when I asked him, would you hold financing for me? And I said, I'll get a bank note for 80%. Would you hold? He actually held 20%. He held all of it. He said yes, because he knew he was marking it up, and he had the margin in there to do that. And so what I found was that when I dealt with investors, they were open to holding financing because they understood the game. That's how they got it started. They understood the mortgages, the liens, how to do it, what the things were. They had no problem holding financing. And so this particular seller, I got connected to a wholesaler, started buying homes from the wholesaler. He held financing on every single property. Now, again, it goes back to my first foundation principle, good deals attract money. We were a good deal because when he gave us a second mortgage, I paid him back. And he was like, oh, this guy's a good bet. He gave me another one, another one, because we always paid him back. We would either sell the house, refinance the house, or just make payments, and we kept all of our agreements. He had no problem selling his properties. So what's the thing to learn here is that when you go to do seller financing, the place to go is maybe it's investment clubs, look for investment properties that are for sale, small commercial properties. All of those things are owned by people who stepped into the investment realm. And so they're much more likely to be creative in their strategies to help you purchase the property. It's just numbers. They're not emotionally attached to the house. They understand how everything works. It's much easier to get the seller financing option approved and agreed upon to do. And so right now, our main industry or business that we're in is assisted living. So I own assisted living facilities. And I purchased those from other people, and every single one of them has a seller that's holding financing. And when I sold our existing buildings that were assisted living facilities, I held financing for somebody else to get into it. And typically it's about 10%. So the seller, as me as a seller, I would hold 10%. The buyer would bring in 10%. The bank would give 80%. Or if they're bringing in 70, the bank would only give 75. The seller has to bring in 15. I hold 10. We got a deal. And that is very common in the investment world. So if you're getting started, have limited down payment, and you want to use this strategy, I would not suggest going to just every run-of-the-mill house that's out there for sale and asking for this, because the majority of the time you're going to get told no, because the average seller just wants their cash to go to the next property. If you want to use this strategy, you need to use investors that are familiar with it and that will enjoy helping you get into your first deal. It boils down to that seller financing is a fantastic strategy, not only for beginners that are getting started, but for seasoned investors that want to make their capital go a little bit further and that are dealing with other investors that understand how all these things work together to make transactions successful. Hope you enjoyed this. Come back again. Remember to subscribe to Real Estate Cookies, and hopefully you're getting some bite-sized chunks to help you get started. Take care.